There is a quiet village nestled in the hills of South Korea where the mist rolls in each morning from the river, curling around the wooden houses and narrow streets. Locals whisper about a figure they call the paper bride, a woman dressed in traditional wedding attire, appearing on cloudy days when the sun barely reaches the earth. I had arrived in the village late in the afternoon, following a trail through the surrounding hills. The fog had already begun to settle over the fields, and the small houses seemed to huddle together like they were sharing secrets. An old inn near the center of town offered a room for the night, and I accepted, hoping to explore the village more in the morning. As I walked along the narrow streets, I first noticed her near the riverbank. She was standing perfectly still, wearing a white hanbok trimmed with red patterns. Her hair was long and dark, flowing over her shoulders, and her face was partially hidden behind a delicate paper mask. The mask was intricately folded, resembling a traditional wedding design, but her eyes peeked out from the openings, observing, unblinking, and somehow ancient. At first, I thought she was a visitor or a bride taking pictures, but something about her posture was unnerving. She didn't move, even as children played nearby or villagers passed. Her gaze seemed to follow me, though I had never spoken to her. Curiosity drew me closer. I took slow steps, careful not to startle her. As I approached, I noticed that she held something in her hands, small folded papers, stacked neatly like invitations. I stepped closer and she finally raised her head, tilting it slightly. Then, with the gentlest motion, she extended a single paper toward me. I hesitated. Something about the gesture felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. The fog swirled between us, and the world seemed to hold its breath. I took the paper. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt a subtle warmth, as if it had absorbed the sunlight that never reached this misty corner of the village. On the paper, written in precise, delicate handwriting, were 4 words: "Follow me carefully." I looked up, expecting her to lead somewhere, but she didn't move. She simply nodded, as if confirming that I had understood. Then she turned and stepped away slowly, her feet making no sound against the damp grass. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something about the fog, the mask, the perfectly folded paper, all of it suggested that this was no ordinary bride, no ordinary visitor. I took a deep breath and followed her cautiously, keeping my distance. The villagers paid her no mind, or so it seemed, but the further I walked behind her, the more I realized the world had changed. The air felt heavier. The sounds of the village seemed muted. And somewhere in the quiet, I sensed that the paper bride was not simply walking. She was watching, measuring, and guiding me along a path I did not yet understand. I followed the paper bride through narrow alleyways and past the outskirts of the village. The fog thickened as we moved, curling around the edges of the wooden houses and making familiar paths appear unfamiliar. Every step I took, I felt as though the ground beneath me had changed. The village seemed both the same and entirely different, as if I were walking through a memory reshaped by someone else. She moved slowly, deliberately, never looking back, her paper mask always facing forward. Each step seemed measured, ritualistic, and I began to notice something strange. With every few meters, she dropped a single folded piece of paper onto the ground. They fluttered slightly in the breeze like delicate white leaves that had landed just for me. Curiosity overpowered my caution, and I bent down to pick up one of the papers. It was blank at first glance, but as I held it under the dim light of the fading day, faint lines of writing slowly appeared. The words were instructions, clear and simple. Do not stop. Do not speak. Keep following. I looked up at her, but her mask was unreadable. The red and white patterns seemed almost alive, twisting subtly with the movement of the fog. I swallowed hard, realizing that I was no longer just following someone. I was participating in a ritual I did not understand. The path led us to the edge of a bamboo grove, where the fog grew thicker and the trees formed a natural archway. Each bamboo stalk swayed gently, yet there was no wind, only the faint sensation that the forest itself was observing us. My heartbeat quickened. She stopped at the center of the grove and turned toward me. Slowly, she raised a hand and extended the next piece of paper. This one was larger, carefully folded into a square. I took it, and the words appeared almost immediately. "Look around, but do not turn your back." I froze, unsure what I was meant to see. The grove seemed empty, yet I could feel a presence. Not her, but something else. Something hidden, just beyond my sight. My eyes scanned the bamboo, but nothing moved. Only shadows stretched unnaturally along the forest floor, lingering longer than they should have. I glanced at the paper bride, and she nodded ever so slightly, confirming that I had read the instructions correctly. Then she stepped aside, revealing a faint path leading deeper into the grove, shrouded in mist. The bamboo seemed to bend inward, forming a tunnel that both invited and warned me. I hesitated for a moment, but the papers had created a strange trust. I stepped forward carefully, following the path. The fog thickened around me, and the world became quieter. Even my breathing sounded loud in the oppressive stillness. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost inaudible, like someone speaking just beyond the edge of perception. "Do not falter." It was not the paper bride. I knew that immediately. Her presence was serene, controlled, predictable. This whisper carried impatience and intent, as if the forest itself were testing me. I held the folded paper tighter, my knuckles white. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to run, to escape the grove. But the next step revealed the paper bride again. Still serene, still silent, her mask facing forward, guiding me deeper. I realized then that this journey was not about a destination. It was about following, about obedience, about learning the rules of a world that existed just beyond ordinary perception. And somewhere in the fog, I felt eyes watching. Not hers, but something older, something that had been waiting for someone like me. The deeper I followed her into the bamboo grove, the more distorted the world became. The fog thickened to a point where the edges of the bamboo stalks seemed to blur and merge into one another. Shadows danced in impossible ways, stretching long and then vanishing in the blink of an eye. Every step felt measured, as though the grove itself counted my movements. The paper bride moved gracefully ahead, her mask unwavering, her presence calm and deliberate. Each time I glanced down, I noticed more of the folded papers scattered along the path. Their messages had become less about instructions and more about warnings. Do not speak, do not stray, observe carefully. It was impossible to ignore the feeling that we were not alone. Something invisible followed us, moving in perfect synchrony with my own steps. I could hear nothing, see nothing, and yet I felt it. A weight pressing gently against the edge of perception, testing my attention, my awareness. Suddenly, the paper bride stopped in a small clearing where the fog thinned slightly. She turned fully toward me, raising both hands now to present a single larger paper. I hesitated before taking it, feeling a shiver run down my spine. The words appeared instantly, glowing faintly. "The path is a test. Look closely but do not follow the sound." I turned my gaze across the clearing. At first, everything seemed ordinary: bamboo, fog, and the faint dim light filtering from above. But then, a subtle shift caught my eye, a rustle in the mist that wasn't caused by wind, a shadow that moved with deliberate intent. I strained my eyes and the whisper of voices began. Low, indistinct murmurs, repeating phrases I couldn't fully understand, yet somehow familiar. The paper bride remained still, patient, watching. She did not react to the whispers, as if she could see what I could not. And then I realized, the whispering was not random. It was guiding me, or perhaps testing me, to see whether I would follow blindly or heed the instructions written on the papers. I took a slow step forward, remembering the glowing words. Do not follow the sound. My foot hovered over the clearing floor, heart racing. The whispers became more insistent, closer, forming faint shapes in the fog that mimicked movement, almost like figures, human-shaped, but intangible. I clenched the paper tighter and forced myself to look at the paper bride. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture telling me to continue. Slowly, I stepped past the ephemeral figures. The whispers tried to pull my attention, but I didn't turn. My eyes remained on her mask, her stillness, her direction. The clearing ended abruptly, and a narrow tunnel of bamboo opened ahead. The fog seemed to part for her, and I followed, each step echoing lightly, as though the grove itself listened. I realized that I was learning the rhythm of this place, how to move without drawing attention, how to obey unseen rules without questioning them. Then, for the first time, I heard it clearly, a faint, deliberate footstep behind me. Not fast, not close enough to panic, but precise. And it was not the paper bride. I froze. The fog shifted slightly. A shape passed behind the mist, tall, formless, yet undeniably present. I held my breath. The paper bride stopped, her hands lowered, her mask angled slightly toward me. Her presence was steady. She did not react to what I sensed behind me. That alone told me something. Whatever was following, it recognized her. I realized in that moment that I was no longer merely following. I was participating in something far older than the village, the forest, or even the river. I was part of a ritual, guided by her presence, observed by something else entirely. The papers were no longer just instructions. They were keys to survival. The tunnel of bamboo stretched on, fog clinging to the stalks like a living curtain. Every step I took felt measured, deliberate. The whispers behind me had faded, but I could still sense a presence, something invisible, silent, and patient, following my every move. The paper bride led me to a small clearing where the fog seemed to part naturally, revealing a stone platform. She stepped onto it first and extended another folded paper toward me. My hands shook slightly as I accepted it. The words glowed faintly in the dim light. "Do not look behind. You are being watched." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. The instructions were clear, but the implication made the hair on my arms stand up. The presence from before was not idle. It was learning, observing, waiting for me to falter. I glanced briefly at the paper bride. Her posture was calm, serene, almost otherworldly. Her mask did not move, but I felt her gaze lock on me, steady and guiding. She was not afraid. She knew the rules of this place intimately. I took a deep breath and stepped forward onto the platform. As I did, the mist thickened around the edges, forming shapes that mimicked movement. Shadows stretched in impossible directions, bending around the bamboo and stone. My instincts screamed to look, but I forced my eyes forward, keeping the paper bride in sight. A whisper floated through the clearing, soft but deliberate. "Turn, and you belong to the mist." My chest tightened. The fog pressed closer, curling at my feet, almost as if trying to trap me. I could feel it. The forest, the mist, the unseen watcher, all waiting for a single mistake. The paper bride stepped aside, revealing a narrow staircase carved into the side of a hill, almost hidden by bamboo and fog. I knew instinctively that this was the next part of the path. The whispers grew fainter, but the sense of being observed did not lessen. Step by step, I ascended. Each footfall echoed softly, a reminder that silence and patience were my allies. The staircase seemed endless, yet I did not dare stop. The paper bride remained behind me, her presence both a comfort and a reminder that I must obey the rules. Finally, at the top, the fog parted slightly to reveal a small shrine, almost hidden by twisted roots and bamboo. Candles flickered inside, their light warm and inviting compared to the cold mist below. The paper bride stepped onto the shrine's platform, placing the final paper before me. The words glowed brighter this time. "The path is complete. But the watch never ends." I looked around. The clearing, the bamboo, the fog. It all seemed ordinary again. Yet I knew better. The unseen presence was still there, silent, waiting. And the paper bride's guidance had brought me safely through, but it was clear. The lesson was far from over. I exhaled slowly, the weight of the journey pressing down on me. The forest remained quiet, almost reverent, as if acknowledging that I had survived the first trial. But the papers, the whispers, and the fog had taught me one undeniable truth. Some paths are guided by beings unseen, and obedience is the only way to move safely. The paper bride stepped back into the mist. For a brief moment, her mask seemed to tilt slightly, a gesture of approval. Then she vanished completely, leaving me alone at the shrine, with only the glow of the candles and the lingering fog as companions. I knew that when I left this place, I would not simply be returning to the village. I would carry the memory of the path, the guidance of the paper bride, and the unseen watcher who followed silently, reminding me that some presences never leave, even when you think you are safe. I remained at the shrine for a long while, trying to steady my breathing and gather my thoughts. The fog had begun to thin slightly, but the forest around me still seemed alive with quiet energy, the kind that makes every rustle and shadow feel intentional. I realized I wasn't just physically following the paper bride anymore. I was mentally navigating a space that obeyed rules I had only just begun to understand. The final paper she had left in my hands glowed faintly under the flickering candlelight. I unfolded it again, hoping for clarity, and read the message once more. The watch never ends. The words echoed in my mind. It wasn't just a warning, it was a fact. Someone, or something, had been observing the path long before I arrived, and my journey had been a test of awareness and restraint. The paper bride's guidance had kept me safe, but the watcher was still present. A faint movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. Shadows shifted in the mist. I held my breath, expecting to see the paper bride return, but the figure that emerged was taller, indistinct, and entirely different. Its form was almost human, yet it hovered slightly above the ground, moving silently through the fog. I froze, recalling the instructions from the papers. Do not follow the sound, do not look behind. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I kept my eyes forward, focusing only on the candlelight. The figure paused, as though acknowledging my obedience, then drifted closer to the base of the hill without a sound. I realized that this unseen watcher had been present throughout the journey, guiding, testing, and observing each of my choices. The paper bride had led me safely through her portion of the path, but the watcher now ensured that the rules were clear and unbroken. I carefully placed the papers in my pocket, the physical weight grounding me as I prepared to descend the hill. Step by step, I followed the narrow trail back through the bamboo grove. Every shadow seemed longer, every rustle sharper, yet the presence never threatened me. It simply observed. By the time I reached the outskirts of the village, the fog had lifted completely and sunlight began to spill across the fields. Normalcy returned gradually, yet I knew it was fragile. The forest, the shrine, and the paper bride existed in a layer of reality that most people never encounter. But that layer had followed me here, lingering invisibly, reminding me that the journey was far from over. I looked back toward the hills, half expecting to see the paper bride standing silently in the mist. But there was nothing. Only the faint memory of the glow of her papers and the whisper of the unseen watcher, guiding and observing even from a distance. For the first time since entering the bamboo grove, I felt a cautious relief. I had survived the test, for now. But I understood that some paths do not end, some presences do not vanish, and some lessons stay with you long after you leave. As I walked toward the village inn, the sun fully breaking through the morning sky, I realized that the paper bride and the unseen watcher were not punishers. They were guardians of the path, ensuring that those who entered understood the rules of a world just beyond ordinary perception. And I also realized that if I ever returned, I would have to follow those rules again, perfectly, without hesitation, and always with awareness. The village was alive now, bustling with morning activity, but my mind remained half in the fog of the bamboo grove. Every step I took felt weighted by the lessons I had learned. The papers, the whispers, the presence that followed silently, the paper bride's calm guidance. I returned to the inn, placed the folded papers carefully on the table, and sat for a moment. Outside, children ran along the streets, their laughter piercing the morning air. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest, the shrine, and the paper bride were still watching from afar. I stepped outside again to see the hills in the distance. The bamboo grove seemed ordinary, just another patch of green rising above the village. But I knew the truth. The path existed beyond what ordinary eyes could see, and some presences never truly leave. As I walked toward the riverbank, I noticed a small piece of paper lying on the ground, almost exactly like the ones the paper bride had left. My heart tightened. I picked it up carefully, half expecting the handwriting to glow. The words appeared faintly. "Remember the rules. The watch continues." I understood immediately. This was not a threat. It was a reminder. The paper bride's lessons had been for my survival, and the watcher's attention was constant. I folded the paper and tucked it safely in my pocket, resolved not to look back. As I followed the path back toward the main road, I felt the cool breeze from the hills. The village seemed safe, ordinary, and yet I knew the paper bride and the unseen watcher existed in a layer of reality that intertwined with ours only when the rules were followed. By the time I reached the edge of the village, the river glimmered in the morning light. The forest behind me was quiet, seemingly empty, but I could sense a presence at the edge of my awareness, patient, silent, observing. And I realized something profound. The paper bride's path was more than a journey. It was a lesson in attention, restraint, and understanding the unseen. Those who ignored the rules or acted carelessly would not understand the forest, the papers, or the watcher, but those who obeyed even silently would survive and carry the memory with them forever. I looked forward, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on my face, and took a deep breath. For now, I was safe. The paper bride had guided me, the watcher had observed, and I had learned the rules. But one truth lingered. Some presences never leave. Some rules never end. And some lessons follow you forever, quietly, in the fog. I turned away from the hills, leaving the village behind, knowing that the paper bride and her unseen watcher would continue their vigil. The path remained, hidden in mist, silent in the bamboo, waiting for the next traveler to step carefully, follow the rules, and earn their guidance.